In these next few slides, I'm just going to touch on how we perform what's called a sensitivity analysis. In other words, how much can we change things before we start to erode into our profits or fall below that break-even point. So here is, in this example, we're looking at what kind of impact a change in product price would have on the entire analysis. So the current price being $3.75, and so let's say we're going to now raise that price to $4.25. Our variable costs are going to stay the same. Just because we charge more doesn't mean it's going to cost us more to make it. But now our contribution margin, in other words, what's left over after we've covered our variable costs, is going to be more under the new price. Our fixed costs won't change. And so now we have to sell less in units in order to achieve that break even. And so here is the calculation under the current versus the new sales price to determine what that leaves us with in terms of net income. We can conduct the same thing, and this time, well, okay, what if our all other things remain the same, but what if our variable costs go up? Suppose our supplier is going to increase prices, but we think maybe we can't increase the price on the end product. How is this going to affect? Will we still be profitable at this with this change? And so we can plug that new number in. All other things being the same, we now know that we've got to sell more in order to break even. And then if we continue to sell the same volume we had before, how that will eat into our profits. And here's the analysis. Again, I'm not going to sort of go over this again, but this contemplates that our fixed costs have gone up. Maybe we hired somebody else, maybe our rent went up, who knows. And this now looks at two scenarios: a decrease in variable costs and an increase in fixed costs, and how that impacts our break even as well as our net income. And now we've got multiple variables again we're looking at here. So again, all kinds of analysis can be done against the current scenario just by plugging in some what if scenarios. And so basically, if you have a change in the break-even point as a result of one variable, and so these are basically what happens when just the sales price increases, when just the sales price decreases, and on and on. And so you can see what the impact is if only a change is made to a single variable. Obviously, if multiple variables change, then you've got different permutations of this analysis. Now, these next couple slides are some practice which you can do on your own. It comes with some potential solutions. So, but what I'm going to jump ahead and talk about is the sensitivity, the break-even and sensitivity analysis when you have a multi-product mix. Now, what are we talking about? Well, how many companies do you know that only make one thing? I don't know. If you think of some, shoot me, drop it in the general discussion board, let me know, because yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not sure of any companies that just do one product or one service and that's it. So now a company's got to figure out, well, if we're profitable, that's great, but what's driving those profits? And an example from my own career in potentially losing sight of this analysis briefly was about 10 years ago. My income, I have basically two major sources of revenue. I have bankruptcy representation that where I represent people in bankruptcy cases, and criminal defense. Now, my overall revenue hadn't changed. I was still making the same amount of money that I had been making. What I failed to understand was that suddenly there was a shift in the types of cases that I had. So overall, costs hadn't changed. The number of hours I was working hadn't changed, and probably what changed was my overall life satisfaction, because the more criminal work I find that I do, there is a correlation in the decreased quality of my life. So generally having nothing to do with the clients or the nature of what they are accused of. It's a very challenging area of the law to practice in as a solo practitioner. So I took a step back and started looking at the numbers and saying, okay, well, where is my revenue coming from? And when I suddenly realized that the mix of the service areas had shifted from being predominantly bankruptcy to predominantly criminal, that was important information for me for a couple of reasons. First, it answered why I was starting to hate my life. But more importantly, I suddenly realized, wow, my bankruptcy revenue has gone way down. Why is this? Is there something going on in the economy that is fueling this? Do I have new competition in the market? Did somebody open up shop and maybe I've just been so busy I didn't realize it? Is my advertising not effective? So those are all kinds of reasons that even when profits remain stable, that a company still needs to keep an eye on the product mix, because often if there are dramatic shifts in volume of particular products, it might be kind of a warning sign, a shot across the bow of something else that management may want to pay attention to. So, but now back to the story. In this example, we've got a company that is selling fruit baskets, and the composition of their fruit baskets is 5, 3, 2, 1, with 5 being apples, 3 being oranges, etc. And so obviously, what they can do in terms of profitability becomes, the price of this different fruit is all different. If you go to the grocery store, it's pretty clear that what you can sell an apple for and a pear for are probably not going to be the same thing. Similarly, the variety of apple or pear, for example, or the season, those are all the things that are going to impact the cost per unit. And so a company is going to need to do this analysis pretty regularly to ensure that no one of these components has suddenly gone out of whack and is resulting in, below that break-even point. So let's look at what happens if we change. And so we've got, again, 5, 3, 2, 1. What if we change the number of units here? How does this impact the product mix and the contribution margin ratio, I should say? So under where they only get 2 apples, and 4 oranges, 5 bananas, and 3 pears, the contribution margin changes to $4.40 from $3.50. So that may be a signal to this company that they need to be switching up what these fruit baskets are being made out of. This is similarly the reason that bars, restaurants are very focused on how much their bartenders are pouring in terms of drinks. A bartender with, as they call it, a heavy pour is going to cost, the drink is still sold for the same amount, but if the bartender's overpouring the drinks, he is eroding that contribution margin, because without realizing it, the variable cost is going up. And so therefore what's really left, because alcohol is expensive, they're certainly not going to be overpouring in terms of ice cubes. It's going to be probably the more costly part of the product. And why is that? Well, they could be sloppy, or the tips for the bartender might be better if they are a heavy pourer. And So as a business owner in a bar or restaurant, you want to make you need to have really tight controls over your food and alcohol costs because, again, while a customer might tip better because they get an extra large serving of fries or whatever the case may be, that is ultimately coming out of the business's bottom line. And so you got to keep an eye on that stuff. So back to our fruit baskets. We're just switching up the composition of the fruit basket, changes the contribution margin. In this case, we've got a manufacturer that has 3 different kinds of house siding. They've got restoration, architectural, and builder grade vinyl. Each has its own price, cost, and margins. And I'm going to sneeze, so I'm going to pause. So the company's got to figure out, okay, how much of each of these, what product mix do we have to sell in order to ensure that A, we're not losing money, B, we're at least breaking even, and hopefully C, we're actually earning a profit. Because if it turns out that the only thing that people want to buy is the builder grade, and you've got a very low contribution margin and you're not selling enough of the other two, you're going to find that you are going to be eroding your profits pretty quickly. So here is the product mix. The assumption is that they are 5, 3, and 2. Or in other words, for every 2 square feet of the restoration grade, they're selling 3 square feet of the architectural and 5 square feet of the building grade. And so once this 5, 3, 2 allocation has been determined, we can determine now what the composite selling price is. So we're going to add all of these together, and this becomes one composite unit. And so again, this is based on the composition of the sales mix of all 3 of these units. So if at this composite unit price of $73, we can now look at what the cost is of the composite unit. So we've got variable costs for the composite unit of $42.25. And so simple math now tells us that the contribution margin per composite unit is $30.75. Now is where we can start to calculate the break-even point. Now we've got our total fixed costs divided by the contribution margin per composite unit, and that tells us that we have to sell 4,715.45 composite units in order to break even. And I actually jumped ahead here because I want to point out here that, again, this 4,715.45 composite units then needs to get, now we're not going to sell a partial unit. So we're going to round up or down as the case may be to get to a round number, because you're not going to buy half a bottle or half a package of something or sell it that way. Anyway, so we take this contribution margin per composite unit and we multiply that by 5 of the builder grade, 4 of the architectural, and 2 of the restoration. And then this tells us in total units what we need to sell in order to break even. We plug those in terms of dollars now, and this tells us in total sales where we're at. We've got our variable costs per unit, and then our contribution margin. Again, our fixed costs, we've already done the math on this, so we know this is going to cause us to achieve a break even or a net income of 0, and this is how we have proven that. And I will let you work out this little example on your own. There'll be another one coming. But the important things about this to remember are when you are faced with a product mix problem, they're going to tell you what the product mix is. Probably 99% of the time, you're not going to have to guess what the product mix is most likely. And they will so what you will then need to do is come up with this composite unit contribution margin. Once you've come up with what the composite unit is, all of the other calculations are the same. You're just relying on doing it based on a composite unit, not based on the single product unit price that we had done previously. And then you apply that composite unit based on the 3, in this case, 3 versus 1 ratio, and that will help you achieve the correct analysis. And I'm going to allow you to do the sample exercise on your own, and I'm going to stop here and go on to what may or may not be the last video here to talk about margin of safety.